I want you to get together.
Welcome back to the Truth Disciples, everyone. It's my honour to welcome researcher Paul Stobbs to the show for an interview on the subject of the Nephilim and how they may have looked to the ancients of our past. Paul has a really unique and intriguing theory on their appearance that will leave you astonished, I'm sure. This is a mind-blowing topic for us to be discussing and one that strikes a deep chord within myself as it relates to a particular fear that has plagued me from the earliest memories I have as a child. Paul has been researching this field for over 10 years and is currently in the process of writing a book on the fascinating subject that we are going to be covering this evening. Paul has appeared on a number of shows over this time discussing not only this topic but other areas of esoteric research that affect our way of life today in a modern world that seems to get more high strangeness events with every passing day. Paul has his own YouTube channel titled Understanding Conspiracy, which is dedicated to these areas of research, and I recommend you, our listeners, to check out the massive amount of content that he has on there and subscribe and follow his channel. Paul very kindly agreed to do this interview with us at very short notice, and for that we're beyond grateful. We're absolutely delighted to have you here, Paul. Welcome to the show, Mr. Paul Stobbs.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for that very generous introduction. That was lovely. Thank you.
I should say I've got a little bit of a admission to make at the start. I have got a tint of ginger, or what people might prefer to be said, strawberry blonde. So I'm putting that down to my mum's unexplained rhesus negative blood type, but I'm sure we can get into that as we go on.
Well, I am the epitome of strawberry blonde if you look at me right now. So yeah, don't worry about that. You're with kin here. You're with your own kind. That's fine.
No, that's great. Now, I first came across your work around about August time, Paul. I'll just give a brief introduction how I came across your work. Now, I've just admitted I've got a deep-rooted fear of clowns and that sort of imagery, and it's been with me since as far back as I can remember, and I've never been able to explain it. I was training for an ultra marathon, and I was doing a training run through the night at the end of August, and I was looking for something to listen to. And I was on Tinfoil Hat, Sam Tripoli's channel, and I seen the Nephilim looked like clowns, and I was like, don't know if this is a good idea, but boom, here we go. And I gave it a listen, and from then I was intrigued because it made a lot of things make sense to me, but where my irrational fear might have came from. Since then, I've listened to a lot of your podcast interviews. I've checked out your YouTube channel, watched tons of the content you've got on there. It's brilliant. But for the benefit of our listeners that might not have actually came across your work before, and I'm sure you're sick of this now, doing so many podcasts that you have been, can you just give a brief overview of your background and how you initially embarked on your path of esoteric research and specifically got into the Nephilim?
Yeah, so I as you mentioned, I started this about a decade ago. It's actually a bit longer than a decade ago. I got into the conspiracy realm when I was at university from 2011 to 2014. I started the channel in 2014, so it was kind of an end product of my university degree in fine arts at Lincoln in the UK.
Oh, wow.
So when I first went to university, I was pretty much a weed smoking, psychedelic taking, typical art student hippie. I was going down that route. I was drinking heavily, very hedonistic, very much in that do what thou wilt type of attitude of life. I would say I was raised atheistic. It wasn't not that my parents were militant atheists or anything. They were just not really religious in any way. They just didn't even think about it, to be honest. It wasn't even a thought process, and it's not something they really thought about or put onto me. So I wasn't raised religious or anything, and I kind of always had this anti-theist view growing up as a child, being the edgelord you are at that age, when you're like a teenager. And I kind of developed into, as I went to university and started doing all these psychedelics, more into the new age spiritualist type movement, the hippie-ish type stuff. But I wouldn't say I was ever really a hippie. I was never that airy-fairy about much. I didn't grow dreadlocks or anything like that,
Okay.
But I was very much into the Gnostic consciousness exploration type of thing, trying to get to the metaphysics of reality and trying to understand our universe and who we are and what we are. I was very much in that realm. listening to a lot of Alan Watts and Eastern mysticism and Terence McKenna and things like this. And as a result, my artwork started to reflect this sacred geometry stuff, looking at the nature of reality. And I've always just been in that way of thinking. And I naturally ended up coming upon the end of the world in 2012. The Mayan calendar was coming to an end.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you've been in the game long enough, you'll remember that
Yeah.
that time,
Yeah,
you know. And all I could think to myself was, what on earth are people finding that is making them think the world's going to end? What's going on? Something's going on here, you know. People are seeing stuff and it's making them say these things. I need to know what's going on. So I made my artwork about the conspiracy culture, and I started going into the theories that people have and making artwork about it, and going very much down the psychological route of trying to explain why people believe in conspiracy theories. And to summarize that part of my life, I basically ended up believing all the conspiracy theories. I started to realize, actually, you know what? These people are onto something. They're not crazy. This is real. This is actually happening. And the only reason it's hard to take seriously is because the people saying these things are not very good presenters of the information. So it's not that the information's wrong, it's just in the wrong hands type of thing. And it's a free-for-all online during that time. People were making videos all over the place, just making all sorts of claims in very out there ways, you know, with over-dramatized videos and music and all this type of stuff, end-of-the-world imagery. And it's kind of, the people aren't going to take that kind of stuff seriously when you're presenting it in such a way. So my channel was created, called Understanding Conspiracy, at the end of all of this, at the end of university, as an attempt to try and share these ideas with people in a way that's more grounded, down to earth, well presented, and in a way where people will look at the work and think, okay, well, this guy seems well put together and he believes all this stuff, maybe it's worth looking into. Because this is the thing about conspiracy theories, it's kind of, people don't buy products, they buy the person selling the product. And if you come across as a lunatic who's lost their mind while saying these things, they're not going to care about the information, because all they look at is you, and they think, if that information makes you act like that, I don't want to know the information. That's generally how people perceive conspiracy.
Yeah, of course.
So that was what my channel was about at the start. It was about dealing with that aspect. It was meta commentary on conspiracy as a whole, you know, as well as also deep diving into the occult, symbolism, secret societies, the usual, all the basics, you know, that cover that. And for a long time, you know, while doing my studies, I ended up going into the biblical perspective at the end of all of it. So I've been researching for a few years, and I'd always kind of avoided the Jesus question. I'd always kind of gone down the New Age, psychedelic frequencies, symbolism, occult stuff. You know, I was always in that realm, the alchemical realm, and I never wanted to go into the Christian perspective. It was always my last resort. I didn't think there was anything of value there. It wasn't something I wanted to get involved with, but I kept finding everything I was researching always kept leading back to the evil people who run the world believe in the devil. And if they believe in the devil, then there must be the opposite of that, right? That was kind of my first initial thought processes going on. And then eventually everything started to prove, and I realized it is all kind of about this biblical story. And what Jesus did, Jesus seems to be what it's always pointing back to, and why we even have a conspiracy. So, you know, it took me a long time, but by, I think it was 2014, maybe at the end of 2014, I think it was. It may have been, no, it was definitely just before I left university. I kind of had a moment where I accidentally baptized myself in a moment of desperation. I had a bath for the first time in like 15 years. I'd only ever had shower cubicles. I'd only ever lived in a place with a shower cubicle. And I ended up taking a bath at this hotel at a stag do one night, and jumping out of the bath because suddenly I was just rushed with this electric energy that I couldn't lie down. And after I submerged myself, I just had this energy come, and I had to get up, and it left as soon as I got out of the bath and looked. And I thought I was having a panic attack, but it wasn't a bad feeling, so I don't think it was a panic attack. I don't know what it was in that moment, but I think I inadvertently baptized myself, because this happened at a moment where I was at a very low point in my life. The drugs I'd been taking consistently and microdosing and doing for like 8 to 10 years had taken a serious toll on me, and my lifestyle, my choices, who I was as a person was all kind of catching up to me. I had no direction. I didn't know where I was going to be after university. I was alone, and I was at a very, very, very low point. And I just asked God to help me. I said, Jesus, if you're real, if it is true, save me, help me, please. I don't know what I'm doing. And then that's when I went under the water, and that's when that happened to me. So it seems like in that moment, I did give myself over to Christ and to God. And my life significantly got better after that, dramatically better. All my addictions left me. What I once cared about was gone. I didn't have the urge to do the things I used to do, which were killing me anymore. I felt convicted when I did do them, and slowly but surely now, I'm clear of all addictions. I don't even smoke anymore. I don't even drink
That's
alcohol.
amazing.
I'm a changed person, and during those years where I was developing my walk with Christ and learning about biblical history, a lot of things I feel like I started to learn, which answered a lot of questions I had in the past, which had kept me from believing in them, involving biblical history and the Nephilim. So this is where my research started to take this turn, where I was hyper focused on just trying to figure out what human history really is from the biblical perspective. And then you get into things like Enoch and Jasher and Jubilees and all the extra canonical texts. And I started following researchers like Gary Wayne and Rob Skiba and all these big names at the time. And they were answering questions which I realised were huge stumbling blocks for me to accept God as real and Jesus as real. And I realised if more people could see this information, I think they would be more inclined to suddenly realise that it's not all a load of nonsense. There's something actually there, And so that's kind of where my channel started to go, to try and convince people, like in a sensible, calm way, as I originally always have done, that look, you need to start taking the biblical perspective seriously. It's not about you becoming a god or ascending or anything like that. It's about this battle that's been going on, this spiritual war, and specifically against these things called the Nephilim, the disembodied spirits of these things we now call demons today. And in a way, now it's all in hindsight, because it was 7 years ago in 2016 when I came up with this Nephilim Clown theory. But when I look back in hindsight, I realise I think this was the way to connect to people, to get them to start considering the biblical perspective. It was a good hook that definitely got people in to then learn about biblical history, because that's all I really talk about, that the aesthetics of the Nephilim, the way they looked, isn't the key factor to what I'm trying to explain here to people. The ultimate truth that I'm trying to get across is the biblical perspective is real. That's the point of all this, So that's
I think in the world we live in now, where everything's so materialistic, so image driven as well, I think having that hook, the Nephilim look like clowns, it's a good route into people to start looking into the subject. And I think one of the things I was really impressed about your YouTube channel was all the foundation work you put in there. It's something that on our show we've talked about doing little shorts to explain, more in-depth background about symbolism and stuff. That's what we're going to look at later on, to kind of fill the gaps in that episodes, interviews, etc. don't cover. So I think your approach there is really what's needed for attention spans and things that are going on these days.
Yeah, there's something about the clown that really appeals to the modern mind. So especially to the younger, the millennials and the Gen Z, they seem to be, because I think the clown currently in society has been pushed on us as a symbol through media. I think people are the absurdity of life as well, and the clown world meme that's kind of in the culture of online culture as it's relatable to a lot of, especially the younger minds. And I think when they hear the word clown, something about it does make the head turn straight away and go, what's that about? Because clowns are entertaining, right? And I think in a world of where everything's an entertainment factor that has to be involved, I do feel like it's a brilliant ploy by God in a way to get people to listen to biblical history, because that's what I do. I tie it all back to, there's a specific reason why they look like this, and it's not just, I'm not just saying this to be silly. It's because of the nature of the parents of the Nephilim, and like I said, as we can get into, there's a big thing going on here. So if I could just explain, what happened in 2016 was really where I began to make this theory. I made my first video on the 3rd of October. 2016, and it came just after this slew of clown sightings that were happening in the UK and in America, where people were standing on street corners menacingly wielding knives or with balloons and just staring at people at the edges of forest openings or in front of schools, and they were just generally whipping up a frenzy in the minds of the public in America and in the UK, you know. People going crazy over this creepy clown sightings, this phenomena. But what I noticed predominantly was it was on every media station everywhere across countries. It was a cross-continental phenomena which the media was pointing the cameras at. And the media does not point the camera at something unless they want you to see it, as far as I'm concerned, you know. And I knew that from my own research into the occult and how these things work and how the control and the corruption is, that I knew I had to pay attention to this. Why are they showing us clowns? What does this mean? It's a symbol. It means something. There's a message here. Maybe not for us, but for the initiated who own these medias. There's a message behind this. Clowns are being sighted everywhere. That means something. So I did a cursory search, and I didn't find any connection between Nephilim and clowns immediately. But I knew there was something to do with demons and clowns and Nephilim, just from this years of research and this build-up, you know. I knew there was something going on here. And prior to this, years before all this event, I'd had visions, which I thought were psychedelic flashbacks as I was quitting these drugs, you know, where I saw an enormous jester in this fractal, psychedelic, trippy spirit realm.
Wow.
And it was an enormous, giant, black and white fractaled, big, wide, purple grinned, lipped, glowing-eyed jester monster thing. And I didn't know what to think about that then, but I did know that people saw jesters when they took DMT, a drug I had done myself, you know, quite a few times. And I never saw entities myself when I did go to these DMT realms, but I knew people did. So when I had this flash all of a sudden after quitting all these drugs, I thought I just had a flashback to the DMT realm, like the drug was still doing something in my mind. And I finally saw one of these jesters people talk about. So I knew that. You know, I already knew this base knowledge from the drug culture of DMT, that people who take DMT or go to the spirit realm see jesters. So when I saw clowns appearing everywhere, that instantly connected to my mind. Spirit realm, Nephilim are the disembodied spirits, became demons. If demons are in the spirit realms and then people are seeing jesters, there's a link here between Nephilim and clowns. And it was all just kind of ethereal in my mind. It was very loose connections in my mind. I didn't know what to make of it until this clown sighting happened, and it made me go, Nephilim and clowns. What's going on? Something's here. So I did this search, and I found one video which wasn't titled Nephilim Clowns. It was just the truth about the Nephilim or something like that. And I found it, and I watched it. And it was on this very small channel called The Epic Conspiracy. And he only had like 200 subscribers or something. And he had made these mock conspiracy videos. So he was taking the piss out of us. He was having a laugh at conspiracy theorists, making pretend conspiracy videos in an over-dramatic way to make fun of us. Yeah. And he did one on the topic of the Nephilim, and he explained how, you know, these things are interdimensional killer clowns from out of space because they have white skin and red hair, and it clicked for me then. I was like, there's something to this actually. He might be mocking us, but I know there's actually something here. There's something embedded in all of this. So I started to do my research, just making a video of my first initial thoughts, and I realized the clown is a symbol for the Nephilim. It means them. That's what it is. When it's referenced anywhere, especially by the media, they are talking about the demon spirits of the Nephilim, the creatures that once existed on the earth. Because, like I said, people have always described them as having pale white skin and red hair. That is actually an extremely common description. And that is that is the base of a clown. That's the basic. You build from there to add more embellishments, but clowns fundamentally have porcelain white skin with red hair. So and then I didn't realize until I started making the connections that this actually just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And 7 years later, 42 episodes into the series, it's actually terrifying how much the clown itself, even historically speaking, with its roots from Harlequin, is literally a representation of the wild man of Europe, which is a Nephilim creature. And it's kind of, I'm writing a book about it. It goes that deep. It got silly. Yeah. It got out of hand very quickly. And I'm not somebody who cares about clowns. Like I don't have pictures of clowns on my. I didn't grow up obsessed with clowns, and I'm not a juggalo or anything. You know what I mean? I don't care about them. I'm not like I don't even think about them when I'm not making these videos, like in my spare time and which is weird because I seem to become some kind of prominent expert on clowns and history inadvertently. But I think fundamentally this is just an occult symbol, some hidden knowledge which has been brought to light through me by God, I think. Somehow. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to be what's going on here. But make no mistake, the symbol of a clown is a caricatured, perfectly crafted image by secret societies used for the purpose of channeling demons. That's basically
I definitely believe that. I think that the more you research the occult, the more you realise that symbolism's the language they talk in. What isn't readily apparent to people who aren't versed in the occult is that it's right in front of your face all the time. It's like an in-joke they like to do as well, and it's harvesting energy for them in some way. But that's really interesting, especially how popular it's getting at this specific moment in time.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just go into the history of the clown. First of all, I think this is something that a lot of people just don't really know much about, and I think clowns are kind of a given, aren't they? It's like, oh, well, they're just something fun for the kids.
Yeah.
But that's
not for me though. Not for me.
Not for you. No, like I said, someone with a fear of clowns. Sorry, coulrophobia. It's not irrational. I don't think it's an irrational fear at all. I think it runs on something extremely deep within us, because you have to remember the Nephilim were the hybrid giant offspring of fiery flying serpents, the seraphim angels, with human women. That's an incredibly psychedelic creature when you can imagine what that would look like. What would a cross between a dragon and a human look like? You know, and people go for the typical green reptilian skin look, and that's not it. Reptiles are incredibly colourful. They're incredibly psychedelic in nature. They're not some bland, boring colour, you know what I mean? No lizard or reptile is a boring colour. They are insanely colourful creatures. And that's why the Nephilim looked like clowns. It was features picked up specifically from fiery, flying, reptilian creatures mixing with human women. Fallen angels, Watcher-class angels, mixing with mammalian creatures. And it would create a very bizarre-looking thing. So even from the biblical perspective, you know, you look at a clown makeup as its design. Clowns have big, wide smiles and grins. So a reptile, when looked from the front, has an incredibly wide smile and grin too. That's just by virtue of them. It looks like they're smiling when you see the front image of a reptile or a snake. I mean, a snake can dislocate its jaw to eat its prey. It has an incredibly wide maw. I believe these Nephilim creatures had the same feature, along with sharp teeth. Now, obviously, a snake would just have 2 fangs, but this is mixed with a mammal, which has many teeth. So they would have had many sharp teeth in this huge, wide grin. So it would have been an extremely terrifying visage, a lot like Venom, for example, from the comic book universe. You know, something like that with a big, long serpentine tongue. I think that was a lot of it. You find a lot of iconography throughout all folk traditional artwork and cultures that the wild smiling creature with the tongue sticking out is everywhere, because it was a reminiscent feature of these. The most prominent one would be the thing in the center of the Aztec calendar, or perhaps Kali is a good example of that in Hindu culture, or you even have the Gorgon or Medusa in Greek culture as well. It's not limited to just those places. It's on every continent. It's everywhere. I mean, even Ogmios, the Celtic god of time, is a wild man giant with his tongue sticking out, but he has chains coming off his tongue which attach to human beings, tiny little people around him. But the wide grinning, wild-haired, tongue-sticking-out beast is a reference to the Nephilim, and clowns are irreverent creatures, you know, that stick their tongue out at people. It's a symbolic reference to them, and that's what the clown embodies in itself. Most Nephilim do have pale white skin. Any modern description, especially descriptions from the North Americas and the tribes that dealt with the mound builders, they were tall, pale-skinned, red-haired giants, and it's a very common descriptor. Even biblically speaking as well, you can find nuanced references to this everywhere. For example, Lamech thought his son Noah looked like a Nephilim because Noah was born with incredibly pale white skin. But he wasn't. He wasn't a Nephilim. Obviously, he was the progenitor of mankind after that. But he had a divine nature to him, which manifests in this pale white glowingness to it. And it seems like the Nephilim would have had extremely similar features as well. So, base of a clown, wild red hair, fiery serpent stuff going on there, white skin again, base of a clown, a big wide smile. And then they have the brow ridges as well painted on it, incredibly tall, high brow ridges. Well, if a human closes their eyes with that makeup on, it looks like they have enormous, big, bulging, wide eyes. And then usually they shade it in with blue. Nephilim was said to have glowing golden and or blue eyes. Big, wide, bulging eyes out of the head is reminiscent of something like a serpent or a viper or a snake. It's a reptilian feature again. Or even a chameleon is a good example of that. They have bulging eyes sticking out the side of the heads, don't they? So
I missed the trick here because we've actually got a pet chameleon. He's sleeping just now, but I missed the trick.
But you understand, like, reptiles have these features that clowns seem to show in their makeup as an over-exaggerated human hybrid cross between the two. The Nephilim, obviously, with the reptilian features, probably had slits rather than pupils, and clowns often paint slits going from the top to the bottom of the cheek, like straight lines. I think that's another reptilian feature caricatured into the symbol of a clown. The big red nose is an interesting one, actually. I had a few theories about this. So first of all, the mouth is often painted with red lipstick all the way around. That could symbolise the cannibalistic, blood-drinking nature.
Yeah.
It could be that. But it could also be, if you ever see a reptile with human lips, that would look pretty weird. Okay? So they probably had they could have had really wide, plush, pink lips. It could just be that they looked that weird. But then you find the red nose. Like, what is such a weird, bizarre thing to put onto a clown, And people say, it represents one time a clown fell over and broke his nose. Therefore, every clown in the future started wearing red noses. It doesn't really stick well with me, that story. It's not enough. And it does seem like quite a relatively new phenomena to clowning. It got introduced during the circus period, which we'll explain, is when Freemasons were running rife and taking over the industry and adopting the clown as their own and turning it into this channeling symbol. But the clown nose, turns out, having incredibly pale white skin comes with a certain side effect. It's called the curse of the Celts. And it's... it can cause extreme rosacea. Okay, and it's only something in very extreme cases of rosacea, which creates patchwork blotches all over the skin, not dissimilar to polka dots. It can cause someone's nose to grow exponentially into a bulbous, pus-filled red ball. Like, this is a real thing humans have to deal with, and it's predominantly an extremely Northern European issue. It's something to do with having pale white skin. You are more predominant. There's always outliers, but you're more predominant to get this issue of developing something called a rhinophyma. People always say people who have these noses, it's because they drink too much. Nothing to do with that. It's a genetic condition. You're going to get it or you're not going to get it. Drinking would not change this situation. It has nothing to do with that. It's a genetic thing that is hereditary. And I do think the Nephilim, with their extremely pale white skin, would have been extremely susceptible to developing big, large, red, bulbous noses, rhinophymas.
Wow,
so that's why,
so interesting.
Yeah, so that's why clowns would have had. That's a medical, scientific reason I can think of for why, especially the older Nephilim. The older they got, the more they developed these issues. It's a genetics. The human part of them corrupted the genetics type of thing. They were half angel, sure, but they were also half human. They weren't perfect. They also degraded just like us and aged just like us in a way. So I think that's where the red nose comes from. I think it's a direct reference to a literal feature they would have actually had. So if you go to a clown ruffle, they have a big circle around the neck. And they say, it's to represent Elizabethan pomp, to mock the aristocracy of the day. It's nothing to do with that. It's a reptilian frill. Yeah. It's another reptilian feature just transferred onto the symbol of a clown. If you look at the costume of a clown, multicolored polka dots, patterns, stripes, psychedelic in nature, that's reptilian skin. They're talking about the reptilian nature of them, the psychedelic, colourful nature of the patterns all over their skin. I do think they would have had white faces predominantly, but their bodies would have been just covered in patterns. Half human, half serpent. It's a weird mix, Obviously, big gloves, big shoes is a reference to the enormous stature. They are giants. Would have had big feet and big gloves. Tiny umbrellas, tiny hats, that would have been a reference to they are enormous, and these funny things we have would have been tiny compared to them.
I never put that together before. I get that now.
Wearing stilts, and also when they wear tiny hats and it makes them have a bigger presence. It gives the illusion that they are giants. Stilts are synonymous with clowns as well. That's another thing. Clowns on stilts. It's a giant reference. Many clowns coming out of a car. People ask me about this one quite a lot. Symbolically speaking, a car represents a human body. When one dreams of a car breaking down, usually that person may have broken their leg in real life. And now they feel like their ability to move through existence, your body, has broken down. So a car breaking down represents a body no longer able to move as it once was through reality, So it's not uncommon for people to break their legs to have these type of dreams, or or people get ill, really more have these type where the car keeps breaking down. I've had the car breaking down dream during a time like this. That's why I know this, I looked up the symbol meaning because I was like, what does this mean? Why did I dream my car broke down last night? Well, it turns out it's because I was currently ill and I couldn't work and all sorts, and it's been explained already. So if you take that idea that a vehicle, a car, represents the human body, then you have this circus gag where a bunch of clowns just keep coming out of it constantly, and they're gianting compared to the car as well, so another giant reference. Well, that's a symbolic reference to Legion. There are multiple demons inhabiting a human's body at any one moment. And that's how it was. Jesus cast out of one man a legion of demons that he sent into a herd of pigs that then went over the edge. It's many demons can inhabit one body, many clowns within one car. It's a symbol. It's a metaphor. It's the same thing. They're talking about the same concepts through the symbology of an occulted idea they've created, which is called a clown. So that's a clown fundamentally broken down, and why it represents the Nephilim of the past. And again, the Nephilim were the offspring of a particular class of angel, dragons. And dragon symbology is everywhere. Serpent worship cults of the past are all over the place. Where you see dragons on temples, that is a reference to these angels who place themselves in positions of godship, pantheons over humanity, and mix themselves with humans.
It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. It's all over the world. That's the strangest thing about it. Wow, my mind's blown. Going back to ancient stories about the actual giants and the Nephilim, there's obviously, in the field, there's so many conflicting theories. Some people think, they were the offspring of fallen angels and earthly women. Some say they were giants, some say they weren't giants, they might have just been a race of strong stature and so on. How do you see them, Paul, after all your research? Do you see them as being totally physical, metaphorical, metaphysical, supernatural, paranormal, or were they different then than how they affect us now? Have they changed in any way?
So there were a lot of conflicting opinions on who the Nephilim were. Though I don't think it has to be so complicated. I think the answers are given to us clearly. The problem is modern churches do not consider Enoch canon, or may not even actually know about its existence even. A lot of so they don't have that story. And as a result, it's caused a lot of confusion about the nature of the Nephilim. A lot of people think, well, Nephilim means to fall. So the Nephilim must have been fallen angels, is a common one I hear. That's not at all what it means. That has nothing to do. But a lot of people believe the Nephilim are just fallen angels. That's not biblical. That's not canon. Actually, that is not the story at all. It's just something church leaders have told their flocks over the years because they didn't have an answer of where demons come from. They don't have the answer because they don't know. They're just ignorant of it. So their best guess was, the fallen angels are demons. And that's not an angel is an angel. They don't turn into demons. They don't magically turn into something lesser. The demons are trapped in a weird matrix place they can't get out of. Angels aren't trapped anywhere. They're beyond this realm. They are there's something else. So I believe the fallen angels created physical offspring, real, tangible, tyrannical giants called the Nephilim. and they were put in positions of power and rulership over humanity during this time. They very quickly usurped the official kingship rulerships just by the nature of their sheer size. Who can stand in the face of a giant? Humanity backed down and bowed down and worshipped them as gods. That's what happened. And these Nephilim produced their own children after mating with women. You know, the original half angel, half Nephilim. They also mixed with women and created quarter Nephilim human monsters. You know, it got diluted and then it started corrupting quite a lot of humanity. But wherever these creatures were, they became the kings and rulers over the land. And most mythologies actually attest to this on every continent. Again, I broke it down in detail on my channel quite heavily. I go to separate cultures and continents and I show their mythologies and I explain how this is just the Nephilim story over and over and over again. These were everywhere. You know, and I believe they were real, and I believe when they died, their bodies may have decayed, even turned into the mountain ranges we may have seen and experienced today. I don't know. There's plenty of theories about what happened to them, but their soul didn't leave the earth. It's stuck here. It's kind of it's not compatible with heaven or anywhere really, just the earth where it was made. So they're kind of stuck here without a body. These are now demons. That's what we call demons today. That's where demons come from. So they're not angels. They are the disembodied spirits of the children of angels who mixed with women. That's specifically what a demon is. And then after the flood, so there was this period of time, you see, where the watchers who made them were punished by God for creating these horrible monsters that have cannibalized and destroyed and corrupted humanity. So what God basically did was, all right, well, you now have to watch these monsters you made, your children, kill each other in horrible power struggles. Because the Nephilim weren't that smart, maybe not the OG Nephilim. They still had a lot of hubris and pride. It's kind of in their nature. And they believe themselves to be the divine rulers of the earth. And they deserve to be the only rulers of the earth. So they started killing each other in petty power squabbles over who gets to rule over everything. And that's what the angels who made them had to watch happen. That was their punishment. I do think there was also a period of time, only because the Greek mythology describes Titans turning against the gods of Olympus. So this is the Titanochemy. This is the Clash of the Titans story. And basically, giants trying to get the gods of Mount Olympus is Nephilim turning against the fallen angels of Mount Hermon. It's the same story. So not only did the angels have to watch their children kill each other, they then got to watch their own children try to kill them.
Yeah.
And as a result, they had to kill their own children. Do you know what I mean? So it was a bloodbath. It was horrible, and they got what was coming to them, basically. You know, you made this mess, you deal with it sort of situation. And then they were bound in chains in Tartarus or in Hades, and that's where the Watchers who created the Nephilim are now. It says in Revelations in the end times they'll be released from the pit, you know, along with all the hybrid creatures that they created along the way. So that's what happened to the first original Nephilim. They were killed just before the flood in these weird, horrible, bloody battles. But there were still children of Nephilim knocking about. The little ones, the ones that weren't the 40-foot crazy giants, you know, the children and children's children of the Nephilim were still around. And humans were still around, and some angels were still around who were fallen. Not all of them got locked in chains, because not all of them mated with human women. So so now it's time for round 2 of how we're going to corrupt God's creation. Because there's a rebellion going on, don't forget. This is all a part of this war, this rebellion of the angels against God. How can we further corrupt God's creation without doing what we did before? We can't have sex with women again because the punishment is awful and we do not want that to happen to us. So what can we do? So what they did is convinced humanity to corrupt themselves. And this is where it's discussed in the book of Jasher that in like a 120-year period, just before the flood, humanity was mixing flesh together. The mixing of kinds. They were making hybrid creatures. Monsters that shouldn't exist. They were putting one animal with another animal and mixing them together to create a new creature, as well as mixing it with themselves. So some kind of wild technology must have been involved to do this.
Yeah.
But that's exactly... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Paul. Is that obviously that would be a good explanation for where a lot of our mythology comes from? Minotaurs, all these different creatures, griffins, so on. Yeah. Sirens,
you know, half mermaids, half women, half fish, half bird, half women. Minotaurs, you know, half man, half. But all the hybrid creatures of myth
Yeah.
were created during this time of the mixing of kinds and flesh through the help of the angels who taught mankind this knowledge.
Yeah.
And it said, a lot of this knowledge was taught to them by the Watchers initially, and once the Watchers were gone, humanity had retained a lot of this knowledge, and it came upon themselves to corrupt themselves and turn themselves into Nephilim, Nephilim-like creatures, Nephilim-esque. The phrase I've coined is they Nephilimified themselves. They turned themselves into petty Nephilim or faux Nephilim, in an attempt to be like their gods. They did things to themselves to give themselves mutant X-Men type powers. They became X-Men. They used to be men, but now there's something else type of thing. So that's where we get all this comic book superhero symbolism from. It's a harking back to this thing, this corruption of humanity in this specific time. I do believe a lot of them, when they corrupted their spirit, their flesh, I believe that also turned them into an incompatible creature, and they also became demons in death as well. So there's a hierarchy. There's the humans who corrupted themselves. They're the lowest form of demon, and then above them are the original Nephilim, who are hybrid creatures from angels and humans. They are also demons, but in the hierarchy of demonology, there's levels. A lot of demons are represented as like goat men or something like that. Fawns, which were fawns which followed Dionysus around, who was another fallen angel god. It said that Dionysus, Dionysus, for example, which was this mysterious god of wine and debauchery. He basically traveled around with like a group, a posse, and these were anyone who like got caught up in his spell or his music and followed him would turn into fawns. They would turn into hybrid creatures. So this was something fallen angels were doing to people in a weird way as well. It's a strange time to live, but humanity corrupting their own flesh was definitely happening then as well. So flood comes, full reset. All flesh was corrupted by this point. God tried to save his creation through Noah and his family, and obviously with the animals that weren't fully just melded into other animals. And I think the flood was a success. People argue, well, if you're saying the Nephilim survived the flood, then God failed. I was like, I don't think he failed. I think he destroyed the infrastructure which was maintaining this corrupted world. So all the temples, the buildings, the cities that were created were destroyed. Everything that was established, the structures that were put in place to maintain this worship and veneration of fallen angels and their children was decimated. Full reset, But the issue is, you now have fish people, mermaids. They can survive floods. This is the thing, and it did happen, There's plenty of myth to say after the flood that people still encountered these creatures, and I don't deny it at all. It's said that the women who mated with the fallen angels became sirens. That's straight from the Book of Enoch. And I don't know if that was a punishment for what they did by God, or a gift from the fallen angels to make them stronger and more invincible and hardy, to help them survive the flood. But whatever happened, because think about this, giving birth to a Nephilim is brutal. Women died when they gave birth to these things. It just burst out of them like Alien, it split them in half. Women did not survive. Women did not survive the birth of a Nephilim creature. But if they were turned into sirens, half serpent women, then they can survive giving birth to Nephilim. They also have regenerative properties, just like the Nephilim do. They have this divine nature to them. They are capable of producing more children and offspring for the fallen angels. So I think that's the whole point of the sirenization of these women. And so a lot of corruption of the flesh was going on, is what I'm trying to say. Trippy time. So this is to explain your question. This is it. That's the root cause of demons. That's what the Nephilim were, and they came back after the flood. How? Many theories. Maybe I'll just gloss over them for now, and you go to my channel to look at it. But the point is, they were there. They came back. They made it past the flood and then repopulated again. And that's the story of God's chosen people, Israel, coming out of Egypt and slavery in Egypt, and then taking back the lands which were just covered with these giants. And that's the story.
Do you think? Sorry, Paul. Do you think the ones that made it after the flood, it would explain why we don't see the massive giants of old, because they were watered down a few generations? So they might have not be like the full Nephilim, but
Oh no,
almost.
I think the giantism corruption came back in full force. It says
Oh, right.
in Numbers 11:33, I think it is.
Hmm.
We were as grasshoppers in their sight.
Yeah, that's right.
We're like insects to these things. They are
Hmm.
enormous. Like I do think, yeah, the
Yeah,
full giant corruption came back in full swing. Whatever
yeah.
was done was done. Now they were mainly called Rephaim. Now Rephaim's a
Hmm.
weird word because first of all, Nephilim comes from two root Hebrew words, Nephil and Nephal. So Nephil means tyrannical giant.
Hmm.
It means tyrannical ruler, like an archon of some kind. But tyrannical is the underpinning nature of a Nephil. It's kind of and so is giant.
Hmm.
Giant and evil. Basically, that's what Nephil means. But Nephal means to fall. So what that translates to is the giant evil rulers of the fallen. So of the fallen angels. That's what Nephilim literally means. But Rephaim
Yeah.
doesn't mean that. Rephaim is I think it's a Canaanite word. I think it comes from, and it basically means healer or one that was healed or has the ability to heal. So it implies, because the Rephaim was synonymous with giant, that the Rephaim were the giants of the past who have in some way healed themselves and come back from the dead. Because
No.
Rephaim also means the dead ones. So they are the
Yeah.
undead, the resurrected dead. So it seems like many of these giant bodies that may have been floating around after the flood,
Hmm.
when the flood
Yeah.
resided, giant bodies everywhere, somehow the spirit managed to embody their bodies again and come back. But
Yeah.
Gary Wayne, an author, I've talked to him a few times. He wrote the book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. He postulated that it seems like a lot of these old religions that involve some kind of underworld or special heaven, like
Hmm.
in Norse mythology, for example, they have Valhalla. In,
Hmm.
in Greek mythology, they have Hades, this place to go to. It's described as like a real place, like a physical, tangible place they can get to. Not like a heaven where your spirit goes, but a place where they can physically reside. So it's
Yeah.
implying that these places are actually somehow pocket dimensions created by fallen angels for the Nephilim to live in. So when the
No.
flood comes, they can make it to the other side in these safe spaces. That's what he's implying. So that might be how a lot of these giants made it to the other side. They basically waited it out in these pocket dimensions, and then
Yeah.
when the flood was over, they came back through these portals back into our realm.
Mm. That
It's
was
a
a fascinating discussion you had with him. I watched the
yeah,
last discussion you had with him. I think he's releasing a new book, he was saying as well.
he
Looking
is, yeah.
forward to
But
that.
I
Yeah.
never heard of that prospect before. That was fascinating to me. I thought that
Yeah.
that actually because that makes sense of a lot of modern portal phenomena. People talk
Yeah,
about
of
like
course.
Bigfoot just appearing out of nowhere through a portal
Hmm.
on a tree, and then going back through.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these. What would you call it? Telekinetic teleportation stuff going on with modern cryptids. Cryptid
Yeah.
phenomena. They always seem to be this coming and manifesting in and out of reality in a weird way. Seems to be synonymous
Mm.
with cryptid stuff, and I think Bigfoot are probably the Elio or the Eliud, the lesser Nephilim. They're not the
Yeah.
the grandchildren of the OG Nephilim who made it to our realm today in the future by residing in these pocket dimensions that they keep jumping in and out of. It
Yeah.
explains the fairy realm phenomena.
Hmm.
Where people, sorry, people are certain they're encountering these fairy-like entities, but then they disappear just as quickly as they reappear. But they're certain,
Yeah.
they're physical, they're real, they're tangible, but they're
Yeah.
also ethereal and not real and mystical and can transport
Hmm.
out. It's like, well, what are they? Well, they're probably real, but just jumping through portals to be here, then
Yeah.
not be here. Do you know what I mean? They are the
Yeah.
remnants of the people who corrupted themselves or the Nephilim, and they're all kind of they have their own realms and places that aren't here on Earth.
Yeah. That makes
We
sense.
on Earth we have our astral realm,
Hmm.
which is like I call it the plumbing of this reality. I call it like the behind the scenes matrix code that projects what we live in. The Nephilim who didn't make it to these pocket realms and died, they're stuck there. They're stuck in this astral realm
Yeah.
on Earth with us. They can't leave. they're screwed. Okay,
Mhm.
but the ones that got to these realms before they died, they're in their own little weird dimensions.
Yeah.
They got their own little safe spaces created
Mhm.
for them by the angels. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
so there's I suppose in a way you could call these creatures or in these pocket dimensions demons, but they're not disembodied spirits.
Yeah.
They seem physical. They seem like they're real physical creatures when they do get here, and that's what I think. That's where the
Mhm.
modern cryptid phenomena comes from.
Yeah.
Mothman, with the chupacabra, whatever. There's loads of
Yeah.
cryptids
There's
are everywhere.
loads.
I think that's
Mhm.
where they come from. But demons specifically, the things that Jesus was casting out of people,
Mhm.
they are the disembodied spirits of giants that once physically roamed the earth but no longer
Mhm.
do. They lost their body. They were
Yeah.
beheaded before they had a chance to heal. They're gone. And they
Yeah.
now crave a body once more. That's where possession comes from. That's the
Yeah. Of
phenomena of
course.
possession. They want to live and dwell in a human body because they can live vicariously through our
Mhm.
senses. They feel what we
Yeah.
feel. They taste what we taste. They smell what we smell. They
Mhm.
use our senses as a means to experience things again.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be cast
Wow.
out.
I've got. I have so many questions. I was one of the questions I might leave to later, but talking about this almost thinning of the veil
Hmm.
when we see cryptids and stuff. Um, Going back to psychedelic research, your experience with DMT, etc. Do you think there might be a chance that DMT could be holding us? Because it's like here, my understanding of it, I could be a bit naive and show my ignorance here, but my understanding of it is that some researchers might think that the DMT we have in our bodies holds us solidified within the reality we experience most of the time. You take DMT and that shoots through the roof and it rips the filters off. So you see these other realms. Do you think there might be any
Yeah,
kind of weight to that?
yeah, I do. I think the DMT realm. I
Mhm.
think it's the Earth. It's still
Mhm.
here. I don't think you've gone anywhere when you take DMT. I don't think you're going to a special dimension or into hyperspace. Or there's many
Yeah,
names to describe this realm. The astral realm is the one I like to use personally, but
yeah,
you could use any word to describe it. Um, sorry, I've had a cold recently, so I'm still nursing that. But I don't think it's a special place. I think it's Earth.
yeah.
I think it's still on Earth. All you've done,
Mhm.
like you described, is you've opened up your floodgates of perception to be able to
Mhm.
perceive more information, therefore
Yeah.
see this geometrical fractal style tesseract formed coding that makes up our
Mhm.
reality. Now the problem is, if we perceived it all the time, we would not be able to function properly in this world. We would be too distracted, too confused with what we're actually looking at, and it would just become too much for us
Yeah.
to live,
Mhm.
live a
Yeah.
happy life. You would call that person crazy, who's constantly seeing these things, and you probably end up catatonic. Now,
Yeah.
we're lucky that when you do smoke DMT, we get to come back after 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They don't.
Mhm.
They're stuck there
Yeah.
in that chaos. All right, they
Yeah.
hate it. They are in hell. They really, really, really want a body to not have to
Yeah.
deal with that anymore. But they've been there for
Mhm.
thousands of years. I imagine they have lost their minds. And they probably are like the Joker, laughing manically with huge wide
Yeah.
grins, big bulging eyes, just going insane, stuck in this place all the time.
Yeah. That's a great point.
You know
That's a
what I mean?
great point.
And
Yeah.
but
That's a great
we
point.
get to come back. We
Mhm.
get to come back into our bodies, and you might bring them back with you while you're at it. You know, you've got to
Yeah.
be
That's a problem.
you've got
Yeah.
to be careful, because this is the thing. It's not a bad place in of itself. It's a necessary place. It's a part
Yeah.
of the creation of this world. It's just the plumbing behind the scenes. It's the thing that
Mhm.
makes this world happen. You don't have to be perceiving it all the time. It's not where the life happens.
Yeah.
But people take it thinking they're seeing something special or enlightening or something, but they're not.
Yeah.
That's the joke, really. And when
Mhm.
you go there, well, it's infested now with this virus, these creatures, these monsters, who hate you. They hate you and they're jealous of you and everything you have. They used to be kings. They used to be gods, and now they're
Mhm.
this bodiless, weird melded together with everyone else legion creature hive mind thing that is stuck in the pipes of the universe and has nothing,
Yeah, that's
they
it.
they hate you, and as
Hmm.
someone made in the image of God with a perfect vessel, and it enabled them to experience life, and enjoy existence, like, and that's why we shouldn't go there.
Yeah.
It's a war zone. It's not that it's a bad place or the DMT realm itself is evil. It's that it's full of these evil creatures.
Yeah.
Like, and we have to be careful. It's If you go there ignorant, they'll tell you anything, and you'll
Hmm.
believe it because what do you know? You don't know anything. You don't know a thing. You go there for the first time, completely ignorant of anything I've just said. You'll believe whatever they tell you. The first thing they tell you, you will believe. Why would you have any reason to doubt this shining, shimmering, jester-like God in front of you,
Yeah,
telling
that's it.
telling you that you're a god and that you create reality, and that they're, I don't know, fifth dimensional time travelers from the future have come back to tell you that or something,
Hmm.
or oh no, we're aliens from the Pleiades constellation, or we're ascended masters or something. Whatever lie they want to
Hmm.
tell, they always tell some
Yeah.
lie. Whatever
I
you'll
think,
listen to and believe, they'll tell you.
yeah. I think that's why so many people end up losing their minds when they get into the spirituality journey, and they might have visions, doing astral projection work, that sort of stuff. And if they're being told information and they just believe it because it's such a unique experience to them. And I think that's why a lot of people end up losing their minds almost in that journey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People see. I mean, I'm not trying to offend anyone here, but I find the New Age Gnostic types, and they'll argue with me that they're not the same thing. I know they're not the same thing, but
Hmm.
you're in the same realm as far as I'm concerned. But they're the most pretentious word salad producing narcissists I have ever met in my entire life. Like, they think they are gods,
Yeah.
to some level, or they think their knowledge is going to save them in some way. Like, and it's like a competition of who knows more mystical stuff, and in some way that makes them
Hmm.
the better wizard over the other wizards. That's gonna, I don't know, and they think they can save themselves through all this knowledge, and it's kind of, you've just listened to too many demons. I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Literally, the doctrine of devils is what you are following there through and through. If you think you are a god, you have believed the
Hmm.
very first lie told to Adam and Eve in the garden.
That's it. Yeah.
It's,
That's my point. Almost,
yeah.
it's like a lot of people that have these experiences, they'll explain it as being an awakening experience, but they
Yeah.
never really question it enough. They just ride the wave of it, and before you know it, they just get deeper and deeper and deeper, and
Yeah, they
you hear
lose
about it all the
themselves.
time.
They lose themselves. They call it
Hmm.
ego death, don't they? But they
Hmm.
basically become a maniac by anyone's
Yeah.
standards. They they're too far gone into the ether, we'll call it, and it's kind of
Hmm.
what Jesus wants for you is to be who you really are, your true self. Who he knew you before you were born, type of thing. It's kind of
Hmm.
people people like to think like, oh, Christianity's like a, you lose your individuality or something like that, and you give yourself into the cult of churchianity or whatever it is, and
Hmm.
it's not really what happens. If you really sincerely want to, you know become a follower of Christ, you'll become who you were fully supposed to be as a person, with your
Hmm.
individual wants, desires, and talents and needs will be nurtured by God. So you become who you really are with your
Hmm.
own identity in Christ. But you won't just
Yeah.
lose yourself to some homogenized way of being, which is actually what these new age religions end up doing to people, with the promise
Yeah.
of you'll become an individual. But actually,
Hmm.
it makes you become more like a hive mind,
Yeah.
a collective conscious, they call it.
Hmm.
They always, this idea always comes of humanity is one. We are all one
Yeah.
with each other. Our consciousness is one. Me and you, we're the same person. We're the same individual, just experiencing. Sorry, we're the same live consciousness, just experiencing reality with new experiences in different vessels. But you pop
Yeah.
that balloon, we're all just air, man. You know what I mean? It's kind of,
Yeah.
they have this, and that is actually like the Borg.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
resistance is futile. Join the collective, become a part of the hive mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lose your individuality and sense of self to this ethereal nonsense, and it's kind of,
Yeah.
that's not what God had in mind for you.
Yeah. Well, that's
You know?
that's the that's the biggest danger, I think, with AI and transhumanism.
Yeah.
The way things are starting to evolve in that field, because becoming united that way yeah, it's got some real dangers attached to it.
Oh yeah, transhumanism's a part of this agenda with the Nephilim, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I theorize and I believe they are creating the perfect vessel for these disembodied spirits to inhabit our world once more. I think that's what it's all really about. It's not about us.
Yeah.
It's not about advancing humanity and making us better and more godlike and powerful. That's how they'll sell it to us. That's the promise. But once these vessels are created, it's not you that's going to get to inhabit them. It's not your it's not your consciousness that gets to be transferred into these machines. They can't even do that. That's a lie. They can't transfer your consciousness into a vessel. They can kill you and tell you that's what happened. Like, you know what I mean? What they could do is your family's watching. They'll kill you. The vessel will then come alive with the spirit of a Nephilim, and that Nephilim will pretend to be you.
Yeah.
And the family now thinks you live forever in a robot. When you died, they just killed you. They just murdered you. You know what I mean? And now, you're dead, which is great for them. And now they have a body, which is this immortal metal construct of some kind, And I think AI is a good example of building the brain for them to inhabit. It all works hand in hand. It's building the neural network necessary for thinking like a human brain is extremely complicated. I think they're trying to recreate a human brain type organ through AI means, and the firing of neurons and the testing of AI, artificial intelligence. Once they create the brain, they can put that brain in a robot body, and now they have a vessel that can inhabit a consciousness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's all working towards that one goal of bringing the Nephilim back into our realm.
Yeah.
As it was explained in the Bible, in the end days, it will be like it was in the days of Noah, when the Nephilim were around. So to get
that's you just made me think of something there. Just something you said when us as humans, our science is good as it, however it's good it's going to be. We will not have the technology to put our own consciousness in there. But if you're talking about entities like the Nephilim who have knowledge way beyond what we could ever imagine, they could do it. They could use their vessels, but we couldn't do it.
Yeah, they'll just inhabit this empty vessel that we've created for them, and they'll convince the world that it's being used to transfer human consciousness into it or something like that. I mean, even if they could transfer our consciousness into a robot, that isn't then to say that you're now in a vessel that cannot inhabit the Holy Spirit. So now you're in a vessel where you're going to be trapped with the demons. Okay, so you've doomed yourself to be trapped eternally in this machine full of demons who are also using the machine, and you can't get rid of them. It's
terrifying.
Exactly. And it says in the end days, people will long for death, but it will flee from them. And that makes sense when you consider they've given themselves an immortal vessel full of demons. You know what I mean? And you're not in control of the body anymore. And God already created the perfect thing for us to inhabit. This is it.
Yeah.
In His image. In His image, it's already here. And this world's fallen and corrupted and decaying. Yes, we die. That's it. But the vessel itself is flawless. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
In that respect, And again, the promise of immortality is how they get to build these things. It's how these things are funded to happen to begin with. It's the promise, always promising you will get to live forever. You'll be like a god. Just keep building that machine. Keep building that body. Keep working towards that AI. Keep doing these things. The promise, that always leading the carrots, always leading you along. You'll get to be like a god at the end of all this, I promise. But that's not what will happen. It's not for you,
It's obvious for the stuff that we research. You find that when you look at ancient architecture, all the links between the different continents, the architecture, that there are links between them. But history's been wiped for, it looks like, on purpose. We're told we don't actually know how they built it, but it's not just in Egypt, it's all over the world. We're told the same thing. We don't know how they've done it. Now, what I was going to ask was, what about the ancient cultures all over the world with regards to the Nephilim and their ancient paintings, their ancient art, their traditions? What kind of links do you see around the globe in terms of a history that might be obscured, but if you search deep, you can find the links?
Yeah, well, my work predominantly focuses on the folk traditions of these cultures, and they create masks and wear clothing to represent their ancient gods. They call their ancestors. Now, when we say the word ancestor, we think of Ancestry.com. We think of our aunties and great grandma and granddad from the 1800s, but that's not what they mean. The word ancestor to them donates an ancient god that basically built their civilization. So these were the mound builders, the ones who built the megalithic structures, the ones who created the civilizations which these cultures come from. These
Yeah.
are the ancient gods and rulers of an ancient time. Those are the ancestor spirits. And that's who they believe they are venerating and channeling when they wear their specific ritualistic garbs during their folk traditional rituals today.
Yeah.
Many cultures, this is the thread I've weaved in my own research, all across on every continent, have a similar aesthetic when they choose to dress in a way to channel an ancestor spirit. And it's by any Western standard, these are clownish features. Paling up the skin in some way, or white polka dots all over the skin, red paint on the nose or around the mouth, an elongated smile painted on, a big feathery red headdress or big golden crown adorned in jewels type of headdress of some kind. Wild fractal coloured makeup, clothing as well, tasseled clothing, masks as well, donating big wide grins and big bulging eyes. Cave paintings donating the same thing in the Kimberley region, for example, is big on this in Australia. They have the Wangina. The Wangina are literally a huge red afro, pale white skin monster that came from the rainbow serpents in the sky. And they're like half human, half rainbow serpent hybrids who can control the weather. They had supernatural abilities to make it rain. They look like clowns, like full on. But you find that these features are in every culture. They're in every folk traditional ancestor spirit culture. They all dress in a similar aesthetic. It varies, of course. They're not identical, but you find enough similar traits in each one. And to make it all add up to be, they're all trying to recreate something they all saw in the ancient past and have orally, traditionally passed down through their clothing and their artwork. They're trying to emulate something. And a lot of them do know 100%, without a doubt, they don't even lie to you about it. I wear this costume to be embodied by the spirit, to be possessed by that spirit. I wear it to channel it. And they welcome it. That's the whole point of the ritual, to be possessed. That's the point of the ritual. Again, they dress like clowns by our standards. So what we've created, what Freemasons actually specifically created, and I've got all the histories to back it up in my book, they specifically created a costume for the theatres of Britain which mimics and copies the Rakshasa demons of India. It's a direct copy. And from there, it got more stylized into the modern clown we know of today, and more features were added, which are cherry-picked from all these other folk traditional cultures around the world that I've just described to you, to create what we call a clown. But a clown, by our standards, is an amalgam of many folk traditional features of these ancient ritualistic summoning garbs mashed together to create a clown. So in the West, occultists can dress like a clown and the public will not bat an eyelid. They will think, silly thing for children. But it's a tool. It's a very specific tool used to channel the spirits of the Nephilim. You dress like the thing to channel the thing.
Yeah.
That's what it's for.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Some cultures as well think that it's going to scare it away, but that doesn't make any sense.
No, that's called apotropaic thinking.
Yeah.
They believe that if they dress like the demons, they can either confuse the demon, so they'll leave them alone, or you're one of us, it's all right, or they do these rituals involving huge effigies to demons, when they do a specific ritual like rotating them a right amount of times during a parade or something, and it will in some way garner protection for the region or scare away lesser demon entities because we have a bigger demon monster here or something like that. As far as I'm concerned, and people have been highly offended at me saying this, I don't care. It's my research has proven it. That does not work. Just why do you think you dressing like a demon is going to scare one away when just around the corner you have a culture dressing the exact same way with the intention to be possessed by them. I'm more inclined to believe it's the possession's going to happen, not the scaring away, because they have results. You can see them clearly being possessed.
Yeah.
Do you have any results to prove you've actually scared that thing away? No, they don't.
Yeah, of course.
It's superstition. It's nonsense. It's probably a lie sold to them by the demons to make them think it's scaring them away, so they create more iconography intending to scare them away, but actually it's just opening more portals and channels for them to get back into our world. It's like a long con. Now, in the Western world, we predominantly have the apotropaic view. So in Europe, for example, we have the cookery or the wildman tradition. This is our version of ancestor veneration. And it kind of got Christianized out of the fall of Rome, the Catholicization through the medieval period. A lot of these pagan traditions got Christianized. And then they became synonymous with things like Lent and fasting and the 40-day period. And these festivals happen, these harvest festivals, where they dress like wild men. And they call them wild men, but you look at the way they dress, it's very identical to a lot of these Eastern traditions with the multicolored frilled tassel clothing, big wide grinning beast mouth masks with horns, all this sort of stuff. It's just the same. It's the same thing. We just call it the wild man tradition. In Bulgaria call it the cookery. But if you go all the way to Portugal, they call it the Cureto. But it's the same look. It's the same thing. Hundreds of miles apart, we all have and what they're venerating is the wild man, which is the giant club wielding hairy beast creature that roamed Europe at the time, our Nephilim, our versions of Nephilim. And it's this wild man which actually inspired Harlequin, the Hurricane, because Helikins is the French name for the wild man.
I didn't realise that.
So Harlequin, which was adopted into the stage theatres of the Commedia dell'arte movement out of Italy, was adapted as a character because the tradition of the wild man was so popular in Europe that they thought we need to add this character into our plays. So they added the wild man into the plays, which travelled Europe, and they called it Harlequin or Arlecchino, named after Helikins. So it's literally a representation of the wild man of Europe, a Nephilim creature. That's where Harlequin, the clown, comes from. The original Harlequin was dressed in a white robe with multicoloured patches sewn onto it with tufts of hair sticking out everywhere. It wore a brown mask with hair all over it and a big beast snarling, big and pointed nose. It carried a club around, and that became Harlequin's slapstick, in which it would slap the stage and something magic would happen and the scene would change, So the demonic character of Harlequin, what it was always intended to be, was a representation of the demonic wild man of Europe. And then as that tradition carried on throughout Europe, actually, the clown would become the character of Harlequin. It would take over the role and become more like the original Harlequin. Harlequin became soft, became romantic, became a fool who chased after Columbine, the woman. But then clown became the new Harlequin and acted like the original Harlequin did, which was like a demonic, satanic rascal, And then in the 1800s, in the British pantomime, a Freemason's son called Charles Dibdin took over Sadler's Wells Theatre, and he did a costume change, and this has never happened before. The clown's costume has never changed in like 500 years. And suddenly this Freemason, this son of a extremely famous musical playwright comes along who was a Freemason, says, I'm going to change the costume. And he changes it from this boring white servant rag. That's how the clown used to dress. Just plain white, nothing special. Maybe a couple of black pom-poms on his chest or something like that. Suddenly he becomes this extremely psychedelic fractal-looking lizard monster thing. Just overnight, like that in the 1800s. And nowhere anywhere does it explain where his inspiration came from. But I have found the exact image that shows that he has copied the way the demons have been represented, the Rakshasas, and specifically in Bali, funnily enough.
Wow.
And someone was telling me in the comments section, Bali is known as the island of the gods. It's considered the place where the gods visited last. By gods, he means Nephilim or demons, but that's basically what the island's known as. And you find there's a specific demon in Bali called the Kalasungsang. It's known as the upside down demon. And what are clowns but creatures who turn things upside down and do everything backwards? So What it seems like what these Freemasons did, because during this time, the East India Company of Britain was colonizing India. Okay, and it was his family was actually involved. His uncle, the person who made his uncle, was a part of the British military in India, and he actually died there as well. So he knew about Indian iconography, and he incorporated it into the British theatre through clown. So he copied the way this Kala Sung Sang demon in particular looked, and dressed the British clown like that. So, and I've got the image. There's even paintings and drawings from the 1800s of the actor Joseph Grimaldi dressed like this demon doing a handstand, and you'll find there's the exact same image and iconography in the same clothing of the same demon in Bali.
Wow.
It's identical. So you can clearly see if you just where his inspiration came from. So this son of a Freemason, who was a huge prominent man in the industry of the day, the music industry of the day, took this idol called Joseph Grimaldi, who was an amazing actor that everyone loved, and dressed him like a demon.
Yeah.
And therefore made people idolize the demon on stage in Britain. And from then on, all of the clowns copied the design, inspired by it. So it's historical. Like, this is not a joke.
Yeah.
Like, this was done on purpose. This is not a joke, you know. And then circuses came around not long afterwards throughout America. Every single circus was owned by a Freemason.
Wow.
The Ringling Bros or P.T. Barnum and Bailey, all Freemasons, you know. And they made a combined circus called Queen Sheba. King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. They put on this huge show that involved 10 different circus owners, all came together at once. Every last one of these 10 circus owners, Freemasons. And they'd use this huge production, this enormous production they put on. Every single costume, every backdrop, everything was made and designed by Freemason affiliated companies. The same companies who made the backdrops and the clothing for the lodges, the little aprons they wear and all that sort of stuff, was the same company who made all the clothing for the show. And they put on this huge show involving demons, the Queen of Bathsheba, King Solomon, the Lord of the Ring, you know, the Ringmaster.
Yeah.
You know, and the Freemasons are obsessed with King Solomon. And, you know, a ringmaster of a circus is not only a Solomon analogue, but it's also representative of the grand worshipful master of a Freemason lodge.
Yeah.
So the leader of a Freemason lodge is the only man allowed to wear a black top hat. That is the ringmaster in a circus. So circuses are literally copies of Freemason rituals.
Yeah.
On a grand scale. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just wondering about the clowns wearing stilts and stuff like that when you think of how they're presented in circuses and so on as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting where he got that image from. If he was given it in some sort of vision, or whether, you know, through his own research he decided to make that change to the costume. I
think it literally, his family. So his father, Charles Dibdin, his brother. So Charles Dibdin was a member of the Freemason Lodge of Leicestershire, Lodge number 2429. Okay, I found the documents that prove he was a member. There's a whole eulogy dedicated to him 100 years after his death at the same lodge. And he was a huge star in the day. He wrote so much music that was sung by the sailors of the British Navy. And he was considered, his songs kept the morale of the British Navy up to the point where it's because of him they won many wars, they considered it. Because his music just spoke to the average sailor in a way that kept them proud of being British, proud of doing hard work for the nation, that sort of thing. But he was a prominent Freemason, so he was a music mogul of the day. Just like today we have the Illuminati music industry. He was just another big player in their version of it back in the day, you know what I mean? He was a huge player in the industry. And he had a son who had the same name, Charles Dibdin. And his son followed in his footsteps and also wrote thousands of plays for the theatre, just like Charles Dibdin did, as long as musicals. But it was his son who took over Sadler's Wells and then inserted this new costume design, where the clown became a boring servant to a psychedelic demon. And his
Wow.
family, his entire family, Charles Dibdin Sr., his brother, Thomas Dibdin, was a member of the British Navy, specifically out in India all the time. Charles Dibdin Sr. lived in India, was going to move to India, but he had to cancel his trip because of bad weather and decided not to bother living there. But he'd been to India hundreds of times. Well, actually, I won't say hundreds. It was hard to travel back then. But he went to India. You know, it was during the colonization of India. The East India Company of Britain was just establishing its foothold in the region then. And, you know, Calcutta, for example, was one of the areas which was already dominated. He had been in the region. Indian Hindu iconography, that family knew about it. There's no way they didn't know about it. They would have been swimming in it. You know, it would have been a huge inspiration for the younger Dibdin for his new costume design. Because Harlequin, the original demonic character, stopped being demonic, it kind of left a vacuum. He became a boring, doting, lovesick idiot who was always chasing after Columbine. There was a gap that needed to be filled. We needed a new demonic character. So they took Pedrolino the clown and turned it into Joey the clown, Joseph Grimaldi the clown, this British version of a demonic clown. And that's basically what happened. He replaced Harlequin, became the demonic character, and I do believe to exemplify this, he chose the visage of a specific demon from India.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's what happened. Yeah.
In terms of the MCU universe and stuff like that, do you think there's something really nefarious going on there? The way they've got Harley Quinn as the female, like the counterpart to the Joker. It's almost like two halves of the same original entity going on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a tongue-in-cheek reference for sure. I think a lot of these comic book writers are in on it. I think they're a part of these secret societies who venerate the clown and the demons in their own way, you know, and they put it into modern media to perpetuate the masses to be obsessed over the same imagery, to keep the channeling going. I mean, there's no greater Halloween costume that's probably been worn by people than that of the Joker. You know what I mean? And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why there's a Joker reboot every few years, and why why It has suddenly got a random reboot suddenly. It's they need to keep the symbol alive in the consciousness of the people because it opens up portals. It makes people dress like them. It's as simple as that, really. That's the point of it, you know.
I'm going to come back to a question about that later on in a little bit, because there's a link to the Exorcist 3 movie. Obviously, we know how demonic that is, but the Joker icon is used in that. It's only for a few frames, but when I seen that originally in the pictures a way back, it's like over 20 years now, that terrified me. And I always wondered why it was there. But now, the research you're doing, the first thing that came to my mind was the Joker in The Exorcist 3. They used that symbology in a small section of that movie. Truly interesting. One of the things I was going to ask about was the Royal Order of the Shriners. Now, I challenge anybody to find out anything of any substance about the Royal Order of the Jesters. Sorry, I said the Shriners there, because I know they come from the Shriners. But I challenge anybody to find any information out about them. They are ultra secretive.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I'm struggling. So the Shriners, you're right. You know, to be a Shriner, first of all, you have to have gone through the degrees of Freemasonry. You have to be a 32nd degree Freemason before you can become a Shriner, at least. Then within the Shrine, there's 13 degrees from there. Now, first of all, Shriners have their own clown sections. Every Shriner has their own clown version, and they're famous for driving their little cars in parades and entertaining the children in hospitals. But, you know, considering my research, I think it's nefarious. I think it's a secret society, a continuation of the old dragon worship veneration cults from the antediluvian past, who have used the symbol of a clown to publicly be able to channel a demon and hide behind the symbol of it's just fun for the kids. Okay, so it's an occult symbol. And that's why you have these secret societies who venerate the clown publicly and dress like clowns. So that's why the Shriners do it. It's because of everything I've just explained. But only no one's realised that till I've started to explain it. That's the issue, you know. It's an old occult symbol. So the Royal Order of the Jesters, because remember what I said, Freemasons created the circus as well. So it's the
Yeah.
continuation
Yeah.
of
There's
that,
a link. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Shriner circuses are still around today. The Shriners still
Wow.
make circuses today. That's the point.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
it's,
Wow.
it's still
Okay.
it's still within the secret society's tradition. That's how they do it. So the Royal Order of the Jesters, you have to be invited and you have to have been at the higher levels of the shrine. So you have to have gone through the whole secret society process before being invited, and they only take in 13 members a year, so it's very exclusive, and
Yeah.
you
Nice
have to,
number.
yeah, I know it's invited only though. Like if you even ask
Yeah.
to be a member, you'll never be a member. That's how it works, right? You
Oh,
can't
okay.
ask, you can't bring it up. So we don't know much about what they do.
Mm.
There was a glimpse at one point in 2013, or maybe a bit earlier, I think, where they were caught up in some sex smuggling, sex worker scandal.
Oh.
This is the story. They were smuggling this person in from across the border. So, if you just wanted a prostitute, you go down the street. So it
Yeah.
implies that what
Mm.
they were smuggling over was probably a prostitute of questionable age. This
Yeah.
is
That makes sense.
this is child trafficking. So, but that's been utterly removed and scrubbed from the internet.
Mm.
You can't find information on that on that much anymore. And even then, the pieces are very. They don't make that connection I just made. They don't talk about
Mm.
it. You know what I mean? So, but there used to be a Wikipedia section about this, which is gone now. It's all
Wow.
gone. They have a logo called the Billykins. It's like a little mascot, and it's basically a fat little baby man with a big
Mm.
wide grin, and he always has a huge erect phallus. And it's usually represented by a gavel or something else, but in some cases, many of these pins you can find for the Royal Order of the Jesters, because they love having the little badges and pins, it's literally just an erect penis straight up. That's what they're doing. You know what I mean? They're not even hiding it. And it's a sex cult. It's the highest level of sex magic cult, it seems. And the motto is mirth is king. So they're focusing strictly on entertainment. And they claim themselves to be, we're just a fun fraternity and we focus only on having fun. That's all they say. That's all they say about themselves. But no, they are up there. They are into the darkest stuff. I think it's where the ones who have proven themselves to be the truly jokers themselves, like Batman's Joker style, insane.
Yeah.
They're the ones that get to be those members. I think the ones that will willingly do the most heinous, horrible things, unquestionably with love and passion behind it.
Yeah, of course.
They get to be a part of the Royal Order of the Jesters. That's my theory. But who the hell knows?
See, in terms of the demon side of things, demonology, one question that sprung to mind when I was researching this discussion with you, Paul, was obviously I believe in spiritual possession, and you hear about people during bouts of spiritual possession where they're in trance-like states. They'll describe seeing visions, getting images. I think the story, the Exorcist, is based on the ex-NASA engineer, the boy that was possessed. The book that was written about him, he described almost dreamlike states where he was actually seeing the entity. I wonder if any demonologists in their work have had accounts from people who were victims of possession that they've seen these things while they were in these trances.
I'm not sure. I mean, shadow people is a really common one I hear described for people who have these demonic encounters. I think it really depends on how thin the veil is in terms of your perception.
Yeah.
So people who take DMT have just blown it wide open, and what they see are clown jesters. But I think because that's not the natural state of our perception at any given moment, I think what people tend to perceive in terms of demons when that veil is not fully wide open but thin is like a shadowy figure.
Yeah,
I think that's why shadow entities is a big thing. It's because they're only perceiving what their limited perception allows them to actually perceive.
Yeah,
but if you were to tune that frequency up, open it even wider, the colours would start to appear. It would become a lot more psychedelic and weird, and then you'd see the jester form. But I think up until that point, shadow entities are the most common thing. I think people who deal with possession and sleep paralysis, for example, suffer from, and that's,
The Hat Man, that sort of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what is a hat man but a ringleader of a circus,
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me that makes me also think of a link to. I watched the Skinwalker Ranch show, and there's an offshoot show to that as well. And it seems to be that when researchers are looking at the UFO phenomena in this high strangeness area of research, they start to come to the conclusion that it seems to be one sort of energy that's shown itself in many different forms. A trickster type element to
well, the liars through and through,
it.
and yeah, there is this trickery always afoot. You never quite know what you're dealing with, and they always take many different forms and have different ways of describing themselves, and they always lie about what they can. There's a lot of trickery behind what they do. Absolutely, a lot of shape shifting as well. Just it's weird. It's these things do have supernatural ability at the end of the day, and it's all right. Confusion is kind of their game. So if they can muddy the waters, get these people over here believing this, get these people over here believing this, get them arguing with each other about what the state of the affairs are, they can remain hidden. That's kind of that's the name of the game. Yeah, in terms of UFO phenomena, it's something I dwelled on years ago, but it's not something I've really focused on the most modern encounters because I kind of moved past that into we're dealing with demons here and fallen angels. But the Greys are an interesting one because it seems like the UFOs are obsessed with genetics and getting genetic material from people. It's always a story about being abducted by aliens and they have sex with them or something, or harvesting the semen type of stuff. You know what I mean? It seems like it's always that. And I think it's messing around with the Days of Noah stuff again. It's trying to create hybrid creatures. It's trying to mess with the genetics of mankind again. And I think there is that mixing of kinds being attempted to happen again. And the Greys seem to be a part of that in some way. I don't know if there are vessels. People have told me, they're like really low quality meat puppets for the Nephilim to inhabit in order to continue the agenda. But they're not very good bodies and they decay really quickly and they're weak and they're not very powerful. But it's the closest thing we've been able to create to give them an ability to be back here, or the biomechanical creatures. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what's going on, but it's happening. Either way, whatever it is, it's still happening. So I'm not willing to just discount it, but people say they are the fallen angels themselves, but I'm not so sure about that. I don't know.
No, I think I've came to the conclusion, and again, it's all just theory, but I came to the conclusion a couple of years ago that it seems interdimensional. It doesn't seem like nuts and bolts.
No.
Technology. It doesn't behave like our physical objects. If you take the speed of sound, plane breaks the speed of sound, you hear a bang, you hear a boom, you get that sonic boom. But a UFO can go from a complete standstill to multiple times the speed of sound, and there's no sound.
It's like a light projection, isn't it? It's like a holographic projection. Because I've seen the orbs in the sky myself. You know, I've seen clusters of them, and they are silent.
Yeah,
and they're not Chinese lanterns. Okay, I've seen them like 50 meters away from me, manifesting out of thin air and disappearing out of thin air, hundreds of them at once. Okay, I've seen that in Lincoln, like in my own eyes. So I know it's real, and it looks like you said it's interdimensional. It's all I could perceive was these light fire dots, but I think what was really happening was something interdimensionally beyond my perception, and it manifested to me as a light phenomena in my own vision. Do you know what I mean? But whatever that was the movement of energy in some weird way that I cannot comprehend. And if I did have the ability to see into that DMT realm at that time, God knows what I would have actually seen.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I
the
mean?
kind of thoughts I've got on it. Yeah, that's the kind of thoughts I've got. I've got a couple more questions because you've been great with your time, Paul. I really appreciate it. I don't want to keep you too late. In terms of the modern pop culture and the way that clown imagery seems to be gaining momentum at this moment in time, obviously we talked about the Joker, DCU. If you look at Stephen King's It and the two ways it's been represented. One thing I did pick up on yesterday, and I can't believe I never noticed it before, was the most recent It movie, or the two movies that were made, the actual mouth is different than it was represented before. It's almost like a snake's tongue. The lines that cover the eyes come out of the mouth and over the eyes, almost like the two forks of a snake's tongue. And I went, that's even more serpent-like than it was done in the original movies. And I'd never picked up on that before. I was like, wow, I can't believe I never put that together before. But another TV series I watched recently was one called Severance, which I think was Ben Stiller made that TV series. And there's the jester imagery in that. There's a Masonic themed scene. I think it's a penultimate episode. And you see the jester, but they've got the long talon nails and stuff going on there. There's also a ram who kind of plays along with the jester. So there's obviously some occult symbology going on there. I came across the capital of conformity, which really freaked me out on YouTube. When I saw that, that really disturbed me, and I don't know why it really disturbed me. But I heard you talking about the fashion shows recently where you've seen the clown imagery gaining more popularity again. Where do you see this leading?
Yeah, so over the past decade at least, I've seen a exponential ramp up in clown symbolism within society. They're pushing it hard now. I mean, it's always been there, like I said, since the 80s and It, and maybe even earlier. The demonic clown trope has kind of been around, but it's only in the past 10 years as it truly begins to like seriously be in your face, like, and yeah, it's getting more and more prevalent. And the next video I'm going to make is going to be about this specifically, actually. So I could just read to you some of the points I've found here, as like a preview to the video. So let me find the spot where it actually began, and I'll just read to you some of my script. So it says here, this isn't without a build-up of media momentum, of course. I won't be beginning this line of inquiry from the CIA insertion of the psychedelic 60s counterculture today. I'm aware the push for clown iconography through the media began then, but that era onwards would require a whole video of its own. No, this video will be looking at the past 10 years because something exponential seems to be happening in this particular period when it comes to the public externalization of the Nephilim Clown. In 2014, we had the release of Clown, a movie that depicts a man putting on a costume of a clown, then becoming possessed by a spirit of a demonic reptile entity known as Cloyne, unable to take off the costume until he eats 5 children to satisfy the hunger of the demon. This is quite literally a fictional interpretation of the truth of my theory. Wear the costume, get possessed by demons. Following this, the American Horror Story series released a circus-themed rendition called Freak Show. This brought us Twisty the Clown, a murderous, shamed performer, and his inhuman wide grin mask, which hid an equally hideous disfigurement. And it says, only 2 years later did the entire world seem to be turned upside down. American politics caused a division on a scale never seen before. One side screamed that the other side was a clown-like fool, while the other screamed the opposition is a demonic establishment stooge. The supposed clown won, so obviously Donald Trump won, and everyone equated him to being a clown-like president, didn't they? Which is quite bizarre. And then it says, I don't care about the political alignment, it's all Masonic theatre to me. But then in 2016, we had the clown sightings, and then suddenly Ronald McDonald was removed as the mascot. So I think, symbolically speaking, I think that is, we're now going to remove the concept of the clown as a fun figure for kids, and we're going to start pushing the demonic clown symbol instead now. That seems to have happened there symbolically. So yeah, Ronald McDonald was removed, no longer the mascot for McDonald's, and then creepy clown stuff started happening all over the place. That's when I started making videos around that period. And then in 2017, Stephen King's It was rebooted. And then he feeds off the fear of his victims, and then in that Halloween, people were channeling this particular demon by wearing its costume heavily. So after this, American Horror Story came back again and created another murderous clown series called The Cult. So it seems like the clowns were just everywhere in that period of time, 14, 16, and 17. And then this all came after the great meme war of 2015, in which the clown world meme was introduced. And this was in reaction to the extremely colourful, multicolored collective people, which I'm not allowed to talk about, started appearing on the world and pushing their insane ideologies, and they're a very colourful bunch, aren't they? And then the Terrifier film came out in 2016, but that was only on like underground kind of like festival films type of thing. It won a few festival film awards. But then in 2018, it was re-released into 700 American theatres. And this murderous, brutal clown killer became another icon. People started to dress like at Halloween as well, off the back of the It release as well. So it's all kind of a bit happened. The killer clown thing was really in full swing. And then that inspired a huge flurry of cheap cash grab clown films as well. Too many to count, basically. So the killer clown by this point was everywhere and really pushing it into the psyche of humanity. That's when I had to disappear from YouTube, unfortunately, for 5 years. But then I still watched. And then it says this set the scene perfectly for in the year 2019, the Joker was released, and this I think was playing off this collective feeling of injustice and disenfranchisement from society, and it became sympathy for the crazy clown, and Arthur Fleck, this murderous clown. People were agreeing with him, like, yeah, he deserved to kill that guy. That guy deserved to die. I want to be like the Joker and murderous. It's a good thing. So people started to actually sympathise with the demon with that film, which is quite weird. And then that Halloween, everyone was dressing like the new clown idol. Everyone was dressing like the Joker. So again, it gets people, when the veil is thinnest, dressing like the clown. Yeah. That's what they every Halloween they push the clown hard, and because they want people dressing like it for Samhain. It's because that's when the veil is thinnest between the spirit world and our world, apparently, according to pagan myth.
That's a great point. Wow.
Yeah. And then a month later, Gooseworks released this thing called Hell of a Boss. It's like an animation not for kids, but it's basically representing hell, and all the creatures there are jesters and clown-looking things. So it's becoming more externalized through animation for kids as well, and the younger millennial generation. This is the same musician who created the Amazing Digital Circus, which is a huge phenomenon right now to this very day. But we'll get to that in a minute. The same year, 2019, a documentary was released talking about Wrinkles the Clown, which is a homeless man in Florida who's hired to scare misbehaving children by their parents. And he wears this terrifying, demonic-looking sad clown mask. It's really weird. So that documentary came out as well. In 2020, a year later, clowncore fashion began on TikTok, and it showed the youth of Gen Z dressing like clowns as a legitimate way of escapism and a fashion sense. It's called clowncore, and it's absurd. It looks ridiculous. But this is around the same time when they started to release in the runways clown fashion. But it wasn't well received in 2019. People didn't really like it. The reaction was, what the hell are you doing? Why are you dressing like clowns on the runway? But then clowncore appeared in 2020, and it was kids dressing like clowns, and they were enjoying it, and it became a subgroup online. And this obviously was around the time of the lockdowns, so people saw it as a form of individuality escapism about the lunacy of reality or something like that. I don't know what was going on in the minds, but that's how it was sold. And in 2021, Suicide Squad was released, and this is where Harley Quinn started becoming a big character. And obviously, people were then dressing like Harley Quinn for Halloween, weren't they? All the women were getting in on the clown stuff as well, and the cosplays were going wild. That's it. That was the same summer they rolled out the clown fashion, but it wasn't well received. And then also, there's this, I didn't realise this, I found this in my research. This same year in 2021, there's this club in London, and it's called Annabelle, right? And it's extremely invite only and exclusive, and costs like $6,000 to join. It's where all the rich and famous go in London. So it's like a secret society club, basically.
Yeah.
And the entrance to the club is on Mayfair, so it's a very rich street. And they surrounded the entire entrance to the club with an enormous clown. So it looked like you were walking into its mouth.
Wow.
Very weird. So I've got that on the video to show you as well. And in
Yeah, that's
2022, the movie Smile came out, which is about a many-toothed demon that causes people it possesses to have an extremely wide, creepy, jester-like smile. And then that same year, 2022, The Terrifier 2 came out, which is another extremely violent and gory film about a murderous clown. And that's got its own cult following now. It's quite big this year. And then in 2023, things get really weird. The clown aesthetic comes back to the runways, and this time it's been received with open arms, and everyone loves it and thinks it's great. So it has a much warmer reception than when it did in 2021. And now influencers online have started dressing in huge, big red shoes that look like Mickey Mouse boots, trying to sell it to the kids that it's cool to dress like a clown. And then we saw the end of a 33-year-old court case, which is a funny number there, involving a clown who shot a woman dead at her doorstep in the 90s, right in front of her child. So 33 years after this happened, a woman admitted to the murder because by doing so, she would get out of prison sooner than if she continued to deny.
Wow.
So that's
Is that the Alpha? Is that the Alpha plea? Was that in America? Do you know?
Yeah, it was in America. There's
a thing called the Alpha plea, I think, where I think the West Memphis Three took advantage of that.
Well,
where
she
you
been
can admit your guilt.
Yeah, she'd been in prison for so long. She got arrested like 10 years ago, I think, and has been going through this whole trial process. And she's kind of already served a lot of time. And it got to the point where her lawyer said, look, if you admit to guilt now, you might get off in 2 years' time on good behaviour. So that's what he did. Like, you know what I mean? But she's always denied it was her that did it, even though looking at the case, I think she did. She was the lover of the husband of the woman who was shot.
Wow.
And it seems like something that was good. I don't know. But anyway, same year, 2023, a film comes out called Apocalypse Clown, which is about an EMP which resets humanity, and clowns become extremely needed during the apocalypse to keep people happy. So I think that's quite symbolic. And then this is the same year Richard the Barber turns up as well, a ex-satanic insider clown who claims to have come to Christ, and he's tattooed himself to look like a clown. That's another one that I thought that timing was weird. And then at the same time, we have the funny one from Friends was mysteriously unalived, so Chandler died. And then the WWE wrestler, who also has a clownish persona, died. It appears that the trickster spirit and the clown in our modern society has reached a strange height this year. And then obviously what's just been released online is this thing called The Amazing Digital Circus. And it has 150 million views already. It's only been out for like 3 weeks.
Wow.
People are obsessed with it. And it's about a bunch of humans who are trapped in an AI-run computer program. And it's all designed like a clownish circus world. And the lead character is this girl who got trapped there and is trying to make sense of the situation. And the internet is obsessed with her and her jester, pale white skin jester looks. And it's getting quite perverted and weird, actually. And it's really showing a dark undercurrent to our reality and how people view the clown now. And I do think everything I've just described is only in a short period of time. It's like they've purposely been ramping up this idea that we need to now venerate the clown. It's really bizarre. But that's just some of what I've got to say in the video there.
Wow. Speaking to that, one last question to finish off, Paul. Obviously, these entities appear to be feeding off of people in some sort of way. Mm-hmm. If you dress up like them, you're giving them energy, you're venerating them, you're taking them into shaming people within certain cultures. Is there a danger that unwittingly even us talking about them too much, naming them, bringing focus to them, is that also giving them energy? Is that something we've got to be aware of?
I don't necessarily think so. I think they need an icon of some kind. I think they need the reflection of themselves in this realm to mirror into. I don't think simply just talking about them is enough. I think they need that vessel, that something or other. I mean, I myself, I believe I'm probably more protected by being filled with the Holy Spirit, and I would advise anybody else to do the same as well. You must remember these are a defeated enemy. They're not. They haven't won. And we have authority over them. We can cast them out in Jesus' name. So I wouldn't have any fear. I'm not called to have a spirit of fear over this. I do think if you're ignorant and don't have Christ, then yes, you're probably at a danger of allowing yourself to be surrounded with clown symbolism. But for someone like ourselves who knows the game and sees through the magic trick, it wouldn't work. So I think you are protected as long as you have the full armor of God and have your sword ready. They wouldn't risk it. If you can call on the name of Jesus and you understand that you have that power, they're not going to bother with you.
Yeah.
They're coming after the ignorant. It seems to be how it works.
Yeah. I think that's a really good message to finish up on, because people don't realise how much the impressions they're exposed to actually rub off on them, affect them. The energies you expose yourself to, these things are parasitic. They can bleed into you, they change you. So it's a good message to wrap up on. Is there anything else you would like to add to the listeners before we finish? And also, if you could, I know I mentioned at the start, but just tell them where they can get in contact with you, where they can see more of your material, and just how to find out more about you, Paul.
Yeah, the message I think I left there is clear. All of this, everything I do, is to bring people closer to God and to help them understand that we are in the middle of a spiritual war, and you need to know your enemy. And what I pointed out here is another example of how the enemy manifests in this world. And now you're aware of it, hopefully it should keep people safe from falling for channeling these demons unwittingly themselves by dressing like clowns or venerating the image of a clown in some way. So that's all I'll say in there. I think I made the point that get to know the biblical perspective. It'll make perfect sense of everything that's going on in the world. Other than that, if you want to get more of the details of everything I've talked about, where I get into specifics of cultures and their practices and how it manifests, get to the channel Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube.
That's great. I really hope we get to do this again, Paul, because I've got a million questions in my head that I want to talk about. But I really appreciate your time. You've been great, and it's late. I know you're a bit under the weather, so I really hope we get to do this again. Never got to talk about David Bowie, John, Wayne Gacy. There's so much we could have got into, but hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, there is so much more that we have not even scraped the surface of. I mean, the practical uses of this tool, as I described, by people in the industries of art. Yeah, it's rife, it's huge, it's massive, and I'll definitely come back and we'll talk about it on another time for sure.
Brilliant, Paul. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I want you to get together.